I will now introduce, I would take great pleasure to introduce rather Dr. M. Prabhadevi for her keynote address. Dr. M. Prabhadevi is working as an assistant professor in English department at Government Arts and Science College, Perumbakkam, Chennai. Her research area focuses on Canadian literature and also she is expertise on it. She is currently pursuing PDF in Canadian University. Her specialization is women studies in Canadian literature. She holds responsibilities of many students related programs at national level. She has gone as a judge for many cultural programs at school and college level. She has produced 11 MPhils and 2 PhDs in English literature. Her areas of interest are dancing, comparing, modeling, and photography. She is a great motivational speaker as well. She is a recipient awards of Best Professor, Best Contributions in the field of academics, and many more. She is a classical dancer as well. She has been a member of many Tamil TV shows. Her voice is very rhythmic, music, and sexy. She gave back voice in the cine field. She is most demanded question paper setter and external examiner across almost all Indian academic institutions. She is publishing coordinator of SSN Research Foundation and Express publisher. She has published more than 20 papers in national and international conferences, seminars, and journals. She is a member of TNGCTA, ELTAI, and other technical bodies. She is a competitive trainer of UGC NET, SLET, IELTS, TOEFL, and GRE. She is a mixture being of artistic and aesthetic nature. She has been a keynote speaker in many international conferences too. Her credits are added with 2 books in technical English. Welcome, very warm welcome, Dr. M. Prabhadevi. Please go ahead with your keynote address.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for giving me a big introduction. Good morning, everyone. It's my fortune to be part of this international conference, SBPCMHS September 2021, organized by Global Research Conference Forum, managed by Infinite Global Research Conference Private Limited, and I'm very much privileged to deliver a speech as a keynote speaker. The topic that I explore will be a boon for the researchers as well as the guides who take up the assignment of being facilitators for the awards. It's an innovative speech which would have definitely mesmerized the onlookers for their future careers as researchers. I've chosen a topic called economy, problems and solutions in the society. I'm very happy to meet Trekar sir, Manoj sir, my professor Mail Murugan sir, and my friend Rashida here. Let me begin my presentation. My topic is here economy problems and solution in the society. I introduced this topic by saying, 1 minute, I have some problem here. Economic theory suggests that sound and efficient financial systems, banks, equity markets, and bond markets, which channels capital uh, its most productive uses or beneficial for economic growth. Sound and efficient financial systems are especially important for sustaining growth in developing Asia because efficiency of investment will overshadow quantity of investment as the driver of growth in the region. The data indicate that the region's financial systems have become deeper and more diversified since the early 1990s. A more formal economic metric analysis on a panel data of 125 countries confirms that financial development has a significant positive effect on growth, especially in developing countries. The results also indicate that the impact of financial development on the region's growth is not noticeably different than elsewhere, and the impact has weakened since the Asian financial crisis. Overall, our evidence supports the notion that further development of the financial sector matters for sustaining development Asia's growth in the post-crisis period. The primary role of financial sector development in growth is likely to shift away from mobilizing savings, thus augmenting the quantity of investment toward improving the efficiency of investment and thereby contributing to higher economy-wide productivity. There has been a vast recent literature which has emphasized the role of human capital and knowledge on the economic growth process. This paper presents a model where the knowledge occurs through solving problems. These problems, which are partially idiosyncratic to the country, they think of a problem as a new technique of good. Each nation must master the problems associated with an activity in order to achieve productivity issues, increases and growth. We will follow the tradition of learning by doing models. Learning occurs after production on a good or a particular type of a grade or of a good growth. Growth occurs by solving or learning about successively harder problems. First, as is well known, countries can improve their productivity and learn to produce new goods by observing their nations, especially as they solve their own production related problems. Solutions to one country's problems, however, only translate partially help solve one's own country's problems. The growth enhancing effects of learning from others depends upon how closely related or correlated are the problems of our country with those of others. Second, we introduce the concept of direction of growth in our theoretical model. We consider we consider a situation where countries could choose a number of different directions of growth. They choose the ones that are best for them, given their individual circumstances. As regards first issue addressed by this paper, the learning from other nations, we are able to 1 minute. I have problem here. My slides are not moving. 1 minute, so I think you're getting. Yes. They choose the ones that are best for them given their individual circumstances. As regards first issue addressed by this paper, the learning from the nations, we are able to model a hypothesis which was described eloquently in the recent bestseller by Jared Diamond, Guns, Germs and Steel, the East-West versus North-South axis hypothesis. A grossly simplified version of this hypothesis says that Europe developed faster than Africa because Europe has a wide east-west axis which allowed for a lot of shared learning among similar countries, an advantage lacked by Africa because of its lying on a north-south axis. On the east-west axis, the geography of countries is similar, so things learned or problem solved at one nation location or easily transferred to another location on the east-west axis. On a south axis, however, learning at one site is not readily transferred to another site because the geography quickly changes in the African region. For example, from dense forest at the equator to savanna vegetation and then finally to desert in the north, not only is the geography different, but perhaps there are natural barriers which will stop the movement of people. The desert, for example, may restrict movement of people and ideas from the northern coast of Africa to the forest regions. It will provide a model where under some parameter values, the axis hypothesis will be true. Even if someone accepts the axis hypothesis, one need not obtain the conclusion that the implicit information sharing is always an unmitigated good thing. On the contrary, we will explore situations we will describe as knowledge trap. Knowledge trap. In this situation, learning from others may distort the direction of learning and lead the poorer countries remaining poor for long run growth to be less than it could have been if learned from others was absent. because the leading countries are solving their own problems and sharing the solutions with the followers. The followers through their prediction and learning in the direction of the leaders. The followers uh, drop some unsolved production activities in favor of those solved by the leaders. The result in the followers remaining followers forever. We also point out that under some situations, the leading nations could be better in the long run if the followers had not dropped some of those activities. Word world optimality may require that the poor not be left too far behind on the technological ladders, and further that the followers continue with the production which is idiosyncratic to and better for the followers. The issue of a knowledge trap is related to the debate on foreign aid and economic development of poorer countries. When outsiders advise locals on how to organize their internal economies, there are two issues related to learning. First, by solving problems for locals, the outsiders may be preventing the locals from benefiting from learning by doing. Second, the outsiders may be proposing solutions which work in their own countries.
But may
And yes, and which they are the most familiar with this external learning on outsiders technologies, the locals may expose find it optimal to develop in the direction proposed by the outsiders. Under some parameter values, this will lead to lower long-term growth in comparison to if the locals had been allowed to develop their own economies using local methods. Each and every citizen of the country has a right to lead a decent life. Everybody must be able to fulfill his minimum needs such as food, health care, housing, basic education, etc. However, India is a poor country where a low section of the population cannot afford all this. The matter is made worse due to the fact that our economy does not provide adequate employment opportunities so that more people can get jobs and earn income. Hence, yes, hence eradication of poverty and unemployment is a major challenge before the economy. Similarly, higher quality of life is so achieved by getting proper education and healthcare facilities. Since India is a very large country in terms of population, provision of education and healthcare by the government to all its citizens is also a major challenge. Another important concern before the government is raising prices of commodities in the market, which is called inflation. Rise in prices hit the poor and middle class people very badly. So controlling the price level is a major problem to be dealt with whenever it occurs. Finally, the income of the nation must also grow with rise in population and their wants so that the development process continues. So achieving economic growth every year is also a major challenge before the economy. The objective of India's development strategy has been to establish a socialistic pattern of society through economic growth with self-reliance, social justice, and alleviation of poverty. These objectives these objectives were to be achieved within a democratic political framework using the mechanism of a mixed economy where the public and private sectors coexist. India initiated planning for national economic development with the establishment of the Planning Commission. The aim of the first 5-year plan, 1951 to 56, was to raise domestic savings for growth and to help the economy resurrect itself from colonial rule. The real break with the past in planning came with the second first 5-year plan, that is Nehru Maham Nobis plan. The industrialization strategy articulated by Professor Mahalanobis placed emphasis on the development of heavy industries and envisaged a dominant role for the public sector in the economy. The entrepreneurial role of the state was evoked to develop the industrial sector. Commanding heights of the economy were entrusted to the public sector. The objectives of the industrial policy were a high growth rate, national self-reliance, reduction of foreign dominance, building up of indigenous capacity, encouraging small-scale industry, bringing about balanced regional development, prevention of concentration of economic power, reduction of income inequalities, and control of economy by the state. The planners and policymakers suggest the need for using a wide variety of instruments like state allocation of investment, licensing, and other regulatory controls to steer Indian industrial development on a closed economy basis. The strategy underlying is the first three plans assume that only once the growth process gets established, the institutional changes would ensure that benefits of growth trickle down to the poor. But doubts were raised in the early 70s about the effectiveness of the trickle down approach and its ability to banish poverty. Public sector did not public sector did not live up to the expectations of generating surpluses to the pace of capital accelerate the pace of capital accumulation and help one second and accumulation and help expectations of generating surpluses to accelerate the pace of capital accumulation and help reduce inequality. Agriculture growth remained constrained by perverse institutional conditions. There was unchecked population growth in this period. Though the growth achieved in the first 3 5-year plans was not insignificant, yet it was not sufficient to meet the aims and objectives of development. This brought into view the weaknesses of economic strategy. We will discuss the failure of the planning process in more detail in the next section. A shift in policy was called for. The fifth plan, that is 1974 to 79, corrected its course by initiating a program emphasizing growth with redistribution to accelerate the process of production and to align it with contemporary realities. A mild version of economic liberalization was started in the mid 1980s. These important committees were set up in the early 1980s. Narasimhan Committee on the shift from physical controls to fiscal controls. Sengupta Committee is another committee, so on the public sector, and the Hussain Committee on trade policy. These are the names of the different committees. The result of such thinking was to reorient our economic policies. As a result, there was some progress in the process of deregulation during the 1980s. Two kinds of delicensing activity took place. First, 32 groups of industries were delicensed without any investment limit. Second, in 1988, all industries were exempted from licensing except for a specified negative list of 26 industries. Entry into the industrial sector was made easier, but exits still remain closed and sealed. The growth of self generated by the planned approach remained too weak to create adequate surpluses, a prerequisite for the trickle down mechanism to be used. The roots of the liberalization program were started in the late 80s when Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister of India, but the reach and force of the reform program was rather limited. There were political reasons as to why this program could not be enhanced, which we talk about later. Economic growth is very essential for estimating the progress of a country. The status of a country depends primarily on the economic growth achieved and growth potential it possesses for future development. Economic growth is very old and highly discussed by topic. because all countries across the globe, regardless of their development, try to increase their gross domestic product. That is what we call as GDP. In India, manufacturing, services, agriculture, and allied sectors play a major role in economic growth, and growth story of India is analyzed from the contribution made these sectors. As per the economic survey, which was conducted in 2018 to 19, a report Indian economy being an emerging developing economy is growing in the fast manner in last 5 years with annual average rate of 75 average growth per annum and with some 4.5% annual average inflation. The present performance of Indian economy, partly supposed by International Monetary Fund (IMF), estimation of India being one of the fastest growing economies in the world, played an important role. Despite the prediction, surprisingly, the economy has not fared well since in the last quarter of 2018 to 19, that is 5.8%, indicating a slowdown in the economy. The July 2019 monthly report released by the Union Finance Minister reveals a 3-year trend of declining economic growth. It is a clear picture of India's underwhelming economic performance for a decade. Further, it is highlights about slowdown in agricultural output, sluggish investment, consumption ratio, increasing inflation, and deficit balance of payments in the current account. Hence, it is a story of what could have been of growth that did not happen, of missed opportunity. It also narrated the story. 1 minute, I move on to the next slide. It also narrated the story of mismatch of economic, political, economic and political objectives. In the story, the later undermined and ignored good sense of the former. With this background attempts to discuss the challenges for economic growth in India by using key macro factors like inflation, interest rate, industrial production and job creation, growth and its impact on job creation, unemployment rate and educated unemployment in the country. The primary role of financial system in developing Asia's economic growth in the post-global crisis period will thus be to improve the efficiency of investment, thereby contributing to productivity growth. The underlying rationale is the region's broader transmission from accumulation-led growth to productivity-led growth. In addition to this structural shift in developing Asia's growth progress, there also are a number of other factors that suggest a key role for a sound and efficient financial system in sustaining the region's growth beyond the global crisis. For one, reducing excessive dependence, financial development, and economic growth in developing Asia on extra-regional markets and rebalancing growth toward domestic sources has emerged as a key structural challenge confronting the region. Financing development can promote rebalancing by stimulating domestic consumption on the demand side and service industries catering to domestic demand on the supply side. One medium-term rationale for strengthening the financial systems is the prospect of large capital inflows attracted to the region's stronger growth prospects and higher interest rate with the industrialized countries. While capital controls are one way to deal with the capital inflows, a more fundamental solution lies in increasing the absorptive capacity of the financial system. A long-term rationale for long-term for sound, more efficient financial systems is the regional rapid population aging, which will reduce aggregate savings, in the future. Again, response to a growing need to improve the efficiency of investment. Financial development will also allow the region's financial institutions to play a greater role in intermediating the region's large pool of net savings accumulated from past external surpluses. Currently, the vast majority of those savings are intermediated by the government in the form of foreign exchange reserves. A critical issue facing developing Asia's prudential regulation and supervision authorities in the aftermath of the global financial crisis is the extent to which this should allow new financial products, services, and technologies. The speed and scope of financial innovation. If financial innovation can wreak such havoc on big, deep, broad, liquid, and sophisticated financial markets such as that of EU and the US, it may be tempting for financial underdeveloped Asian countries to conclude that they promote financial innovation at their own mass and risk. The financial backwardness which fortuitously protected Asia this time around entails, entails potentially large cost of its own. As the Asian crisis made all too clear, the regulatory challenges facing emerging markets are more about risk of having underdeveloped financial systems rather than risk from sophisticated financial innovations. Furthermore, developing Asia's banks have already reaped substantial benefits from innovations of their own, including moving into new business activities such as investment banking, household lending, and real estate, and producing wider range of products and services. Okay, it's not financial innovation, but uh, rather complete failure of prudential regulators to identify and control the risks stemming from innovation, and along with their failure to provide incentives for financial institutions to exercise proper risk management that triggered the global financial crisis. It may thus be more productive for Asian authorities to apply the lessons learned from their crisis. Example, what are the specific risks in financial innovation to their financial reform process, and to provide market players with the appropriate incentives for risk management. The global crisis may even benefit the financial reform process in Asia by enabling the region to avoid the regulatory mistakes of the EU and US. In conclusion, it should first be noted that developing Asia has come a long way in terms of financial development since the Asian financial crisis. That crisis served as a wake-up call or for far-reaching reform and restructuring the greatly improved the financial health and performance of the region's banking system, which remains a mainstay of its financial systems. The region financial system has also become more diversified as a result of the rapid growth of its equity markets and to the lesser extent its bond markets. Furthermore, prudential regulation and supervision systems may have strengthened to be more flexible and adaptable to changing the conditions. As a result of this positive development, the region's financial systems have become substantially more robust and efficient, a fast which together with their limited exposure to subprime assets has protected the region from the financial turbulence that devastated their counterparts in financially more advanced economies. Despite the great deal of progress, there is still significant scope for further improving robustness and efficiency of the region's financial systems. In particular, building a better institutional infrastructure for the financial system as a whole and bigger, broader deeper, more liquid, and more sophisticated markets, especially corporate bond markets, will yield returns for economic growth both directly and indirectly, though enhanced financial stability. Okay, expanding access to finance to more households and producers is another high priority policy area, since greater financial access not only promotes growth but promotes inclusive growth by fostering equality of opportunity. In the broader context of sustaining developing Asia's growth beyond the global crisis, financial development matters and matters a lot, because investment matters and matters a lot. There is likely to be a gradual but clear change in developing Asia's growth paradigm for a growth that driven primarily by inputs and factor accumulation to a growth based on the productivity growth. For example, Park and Park 2010 find more empirical evidence that since around 2002, there has been a relative shift in the source of the region's growth from capital accumulation to TFP growth. What this means is that efficiency of investment will increasingly overshadow the quantity of investment as the primary source of the sustainable growth. A sound and efficient financial system is vital for the transition from the region's pre-crisis accumulation-led growth paradigm to its post-crisis productively led growth paradigm, for the simple reason that the primary function of banks, stock markets, and bond markets is to allocate capital to its most productive issues. In addition to a more efficient allocation of resources in the static sense, dynamic efficiency is likely to grow in importance in developing Asia's post-crisis growth process, and again, a well-functioning financial system will play a key role, and more innovative knowledge-based economy is likely to flourish when would-be entrepreneurs with the best new ideas and new ways of doing things have access to the capital. They need to transform their vision into commercial reality. Institutions such as vendor capital that are still in their infancy in developing Asia. One minute. In developing Asia, they need reform their vision into commercial reality. General expansion of success to financial services and new financial products and services that reduce transactions cost and further specialization will all be required if Asian finance is to transform itself from a tool for mobilizing savings to a tool for fostering productivity. If Asian finance is to become a vital link between Asia's old growth paradigm of accumulation to Asia's new growth paradigm of efficiency, Asian finance will have to evolve. The beginning of 2007 offers a conflicting picture of the global economy for those trying to discern trends, challenges, and opportunities. Concerns about energy and security and climate sustainability or converging finally bringing consensus, insight on the need for action in the United States. But prospects for breaking the global stalemate are still years away. While some developing countries are succeeding in bringing hundreds of millions out of poverty, too many are still mired in the doom spiral of conflict, poverty, and disease, despite the entry of a new philanthropist, advocates, and global corporations into the field of development. China's projected 9.6% growth rate is sending ripples to the farthest reaches of the planet, creating opportunities but also significant risks. The United States remains in the goal-lix zone, but this is a premise on continued borrowing from abroad at historically unprecedented rates, while many Americans fret about widening inequality and narrowing opportunity. While the United States concentrates on civil war in the Middle East. Most leaders in the region are preoccupied with putting on an outside cohort of young people to work and on the road to become productive citizens. What are the most important challenges we face? What are the most important challenges we face, and what are the potential solutions? In Washington, D.C., where short term political wranglings too often crowds out the order and more important long term challenges. This inaugural publication of Brookings Global Economy and Development seeks to put the spotlight fairly back on the most consequential issues demanding action. It seeks to size their issues, offering policymakers and leaders to concise and clear view of the critical challenges as viewed by leading experts in the field. From economic exclusion of youth in the Middle East to pragmatic approach to the country and environmental security, this top 10 is intended to mark more issues and shed light on opportunities and challenges with a broader and long-term perspective. When we gather a year from now, we would expect many of these challenges to remain front and central. But we would hope this publication would elevate their visibility and help sustain a dialogue on their resolution. Energy and environmental security. Energy and environmental security have emerged as a primary issue on the global agenda for 2007. Consensus has recently been forged on the potential for long-term economic, national security and societal damage from insecure energy supplies and environmental catastrophe, as well as the intense need for technological advances that can provide low polluting, low polluting and secure energy sources. And despite growing global momentum, there is still little agreement on the best set of actions required to reduce global dependency on fossil fuels and greenhouse gas emissions. Confounding the international policy change challenge is the disproportionate impact of higher oil prices and global warming across nations, insulating some countries from immediate concern while forcing others to press for more rapid challenge. Conflict and poverty. India, in a
Could you
welfare.
speed up, madam, please?
Yeah, sure, sir, sure.
Dr. Atul Ramgade sir is waiting, actually.
Okay,
We are
I'll
learning about
conclude
that.
it, sir. I will conclude it. I will conclude by saying that poverty can effectively be eradicated only when poor start contributing to growth by their active involvement in the growth process. This is possible through a process of social mobilization, encouraging poor people to participate and get them to increase in level of income, skill development, health, and illiteracy. Moreover, it is necessary to identify poverty-stricken areas and poverty infrastructure such as schools, roads, power, telecom, IT services, training in institutions, etc. We have traveled. We have traveled about 7 decades since the independence. The objective of all our policies has been stated as promoting rapid, balanced economic development with equality and social justice. Poverty alleviation has always been accepted as one of India's main challenges by the policymakers, regardless of which government was in power. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me a 1 minute. Thank you very much for giving me a wonderful opportunity to present my topic here. My sincere thanks to Prakash sir, who is organizing this program in a successful manner, and Manoj Jain sir and all other eminent professors to make me to join this GOR-ECF Grammatic Mandel International Conference on Sustainable Business Practices and Challenges in Management, Humanities, Higher education and sciences. I'll finish fast. If those have any queries on my topic, you can drop me queries in my mail ID prabhapishamurthy@yahoo.co.in. It is mentioned at the last page slide of my PPT. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. M. Prabhadevi, for such a detailed and informative presentation.